This episode of the Adventure Jogger is brought to you by Jimmy Warren, Revel Cotsford, Carolyn, and Ben the Animate Rockpile, and of course, all of our Patreon supporters. And of course, I'm talking to you as well, the listener. The Adventure Jogger, a podcast about trail and ultra running. Meet fascinating runners from the front, middle, and back of the pack, sharing inspiring and funny stories about life and running. Running should be fun, and so should running podcasts. I'm your host, Stephen Kornhaus, and this is the Adventure Jogger. Well, on today's episode of the Adventure Jogger podcast, I have got a runner from the Nashville, Franklin, Tennessee area, and excited to talk and hear all about a story of someone who seems like they've been very busy, but yet still run a lot and have been doing really great things. So I'm excited to have Brooke Wanser on the podcast. So Brooke, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to be here.
Yeah, connected through a friend of ours who was just on the podcast, Joe Jude, kind of recommended you as well and told me some things about you. And I was like, wow, that sounds pretty awesome. So I'm very curious to hear everything. But, before we really dive into, maybe I know you were just kind of graduated law school, I believe Joe said. So that's, the big time suck right there. You're still able to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But before we get to that point, let's hear about Brooke. Like, how did you get into running? Like, what's your story?
Sure. So my story starts more in childhood. I started swimming when I was 10 years old, and I swam for about 10 years competitively. I went to college. I swam in undergrad for 2 years before I quit. So that was my whole life for a long period of time. And when I quit, I wouldn't say I had an identity crisis because I had other things going on that were important in my life, but I was very burnt out on swimming, and I knew I needed to find some other athletic pursuit because I have always been one of those people I can't sit still. So for a while it was weight training, and then I'm trying to remember my first race I did. I did a 5K when I was 13.
Oh, wow.
As part of a challenge for like swimming, my coach had us do 2-a-day practices for a week, so for 6 days, and we also did a 5K run and a 5K swim on the last day of the challenge. So my first race was when I was 13, and then not again until I was like 20.
Oh, wow.
I did pretty good in that 5K. I think I did like a 21 minutes, which I'd never run before. So I felt like that was okay. And I always loved running.
For 13 years old, that's pretty impressive. Yeah.
We ran in the off season, and I always enjoyed it. And I actually wanted to run in high school. My brother ran in high school and college, but there just wasn't time. So when I quit swimming, I was like, oh, maybe I can get more into running. And I didn't really do that for a couple of years, not until I moved to Tennessee. When I moved here, I met a lady who I'm still very good friends with her, but she had started running as a way to deal with the stress of having cancer. And so she's now in her 60s, but she had run 10 marathons in like 10 years. And I was so inspired by her story, and she convinced me to sign up for my first half marathon, which at the time I'd never run more than like 6 miles. So even that, I was like, she was holding my feet to the fire. So I signed up. I trained through like Fleet Feet. They had like a program. I would do Saturday long runs with the group. And I never really kind of hit it off with anyone there. But Amy she asked me if I wanted to go watch her run the Boston Marathon in 2019 when I was training for the Nashville half in that same spring. And so I went with her to Boston and I watched that race, and I was like, I have never wanted to run a marathon, and I still don't, but I want to run this marathon.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it. Like, I saw that and I was like, let's see how the half goes. The half was like 2 weeks later. I was kind of sick before and I didn't do as well as I would have liked, but I still was hooked and I had a lot of fun. And so I think a couple of days later, I signed up for my first marathon with the intention of qualifying for Boston, running Boston, and never running another marathon.
Yeah.
Which has not happened. I did qualify for Boston.
Nice.
I still have not run Boston, and I've run many other marathons. So that's
How many
kind of how
years
I
have
got
you?
into it.
Yeah, how many years have you qualified for Boston? Like, how many times have you tried to get in?
So I've only tried that time and then one other time last spring. I trained for a marathon and I did qualify. I was 5 minutes under the qualifying time, but it was like a 6 minute undercut kind of year. So I missed the cut
Uh,
by just under a minute. So I didn't get to go.
okay.
Um, and I haven't really had sort of the motivation to train for that type of race. I much more enjoy being out on the trails. So I still want to do Boston. It's still out there for me, but I'm like I can put that on the back burner. I have some more immediate goals, I would say, than that.
Yeah. Yeah, because running Boston certainly is a very specific type of training to get not only
Yeah.
just to qualify, but then to actually, finish the race. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's sounds like you're still doing pretty speedy though.
I feel like I've not reached my potential in the marathon, and I think a lot of it is mental, and I just hit a mental block at my late teen. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm fed up of
Yeah.
running this fast. So I'll get there someday, but I'm not beating myself up about it right now. I
Yeah. So what's your marathon PR so far?
think it's just under a 3:25, and I've done that
Wow.
twice. So
Pretty
it's
awesome.
it's not really improved,
Well, that's
but
pretty
thank
darn
you.
good time though. Yeah, that's impressive.
Thanks.
Especially now, was that in Nashville when you ran one of those races?
No. One of them was in Ventura, California. It was mountains to beach. And then the other
Okay.
was St. George, which is a generally like a downhill marathon. So
Okay.
not super as a marathon goes, not super tough, I would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when did you kind of make that switch from the roads to trail? Like when did you find trail?
So I ran St. George in October of 2019. I had a great experience there. I was like, what's the next marathon I can do? Can I make all my vacations runcations now? And so I signed up for this Mountains to Beach marathon because it starts in a small town like near Santa Barbara. It runs down to the coast. And I had like history in that small town because we would go there for travel swim meets when I was in high school. The town's called Ojai, California, and it's beautiful. So signed up for that race in 2020, in May of 2020. We all know what happened.
Yep.
So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to keep running because it's accessible right now during COVID. And we just got really burnt out running the same place every day. And I was running, but I was just not enjoying it. And then I think it was Christmas Day. Yeah, Christmas Day of 2020. I went for a hike in the neighborhood near me that has some trails. And I was running late for work. I was working at Starbucks at the time. So I just started running. And I felt so good. And I've always hiked a lot because I like being outside, but I've never really enjoyed hiking um, because I'm impatient. So it was like, whoa, this feels like good to my core to like move at a speed that feels good for me. Um, and so the next day I went back and I ran and I was like, man, this would be so much better if I had like some trail shoes. And so I bought a pair of trail shoes and like I went back a couple days later and I just started running on my own. And I was like, this is my new thing. Like this is and if for people who know me, I think there's a lot of people out here like this, like you'll discover a thing and then you'll be like, this is now my entire personality.
Oh yeah.
I've been that way with like baking sourdough, like with doing yoga, whatever. But that became trail running for me. And it's not my entire identity, but it's a big part of it. So
Okay.
that's how I got started on accident.
Okay. Do you remember what those first trail shoes were? The first pair you bought?
Yeah, they were speed goats. Like
Speed
whatever
Goats.
were on, it was like two before, like the bigger, clunkier looking ones. And they're great. I still wear speed goats. I alternate now, but I still wear speed goats.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
great shoes. I love them. I love them.
Mhm.
So you got into trails then 2020 during COVID, got your speed goats, your first trail shoes.
Yep.
Now, from what Joe told me, you very recently graduated from law school. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So when did you graduate?
I graduated in May of this year.
May. Okay. So
Yep.
then I don't know how long law school is. So how long have you been in higher education?
Yeah, so I graduated from undergrad. I went to Northwestern. I graduated in 2016. I took a break. I was
Okay.
actually a journalist. I did that for a while, and then I worked about 5 years, and then I went back to school in the fall of 2021. So I had just kind
Okay.
of started really getting into trail running when I started law school, which is like
Okay.
really poor timing when you think about it.
Yeah, I imagine that's one of those education, paths that's not just like, oh, I'll just kind of skate by. You got to be fully devoted and like spend so much time in that. So it had to have
Yeah.
occupied a lot of your time.
Yeah, I went in with maybe a different mentality than a lot of people. I went in with like maybe the first mentality you said of like, I'm just gonna skate through this and I'm gonna be good at it because I've always been good at school. And I was very wrong. And I did pretty not super poorly, but I didn't do great my first semester and it was a wake-up call and I was real scared the next semester.
Yeah.
Um but trail running always was a really good outlet for me, both the community here and just moving and being like in the woods. Um, it was such an outlet for me all throughout school.
Yeah, it's definitely a form of, just meditation, just kind of
Hmm.
getting out there, being in nature, like you said, that peacefulness, the quiet.
Yeah.
It's just there's really nothing like it. So I was curious like how I mean my wife is in graduate school, so
Oh,
it's
cool. What is she doing?
so she's going to get her what is it, the LPC, the licensed a mental health counselor. I can never
Yep.
remember the
Mhm.
acronym, but she's going to get that.
Yeah.
But so she's an ultra runner as well. And I know the time
Uh-huh.
that just graduate school takes, which I know law
Yeah.
school is a little more in depth. So I can imagine. I mean, just how did you balance your day, like to go to school and then still have time to run?
Yeah. So I started off my first semester working like probably a little bit too much. I think your first year they tell you like don't work if you can avoid it. And I would give anyone that advice because it's just a year of figuring out how to do school, like how to do law school, which is different than how to do undergrad.
Hmm.
So I made the mistake of trying to work that first semester. That didn't go well. I didn't work the second semester, but I did work all the rest of law school, like maybe 20 to 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week. So like once you get past your first year, at least at my school, we had classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But Friday was more like a half day our first year. And then after that, it's like you set your own schedule. And I kind of just set my schedule up to where I knew, like mentally, I am fresh in the morning, um, not so much in the afternoon. So to, I actually scheduled my class time in the afternoons
Okay.
because I knew class time is important, but what's more important for me was like the time I was doing my reading out of class and my studying. Class time can be valuable, but I think what's outside of class is actually more valuable.
Oh,
That's just my personal take.
okay.
Um, so I would try to just fit in a run wherever I could. And that often would be, sometimes it would be first thing in the morning on the way to school. Like I had a track group. We would do Tuesday morning 5:30 workouts. Um, most Tuesdays in Nashville that was right down the road from my school. And so I would do that workout and then I would go to school and have class at 8 or 8:30. That worked out great. Um, but then sometimes I'd have like a later class. And so I'd be like, all right, I have a 4 hour break in the middle of my day. I'm going to go to the trails that are like a 15-minute drive, 20-minute drive, get my run in, and then come back. And I'll be like refreshed too most of the time because I've just been outside in the sunshine. So
Yeah.
it just trying to squeeze it all in like that. And then when I would work, I would usually work at night because night is not my thinking time. So I'm not going to be studying at night anyway. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I would game it.
Okay. Now, did you have to do any like internships through law school or part of your school?
You don't technically have to, but my school does something called field placement, so you can get class credit for doing unpaid legal work.
Oh,
And then in the summers, everyone would work as well. So I did all of that. I did like 3 field placements during the semester, or yeah, I don't remember. I did a lot of different things. But that would be like usually, all right, I don't have class on an afternoon, so I'm going to do like a half day at my internship, and then I'm going to go to school in the morning, or on a Friday, like I don't have class anyway, I'll just work a full day. Um, I'm very good at scheduling things and planning, so I was okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say as anyone that's in, even undergraduate for that for some degree, but definitely any higher form is like you really have to be a excel at time management and be able to
Yeah.
delegate
Yeah.
prioritize things for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you graduate in this year, May of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
2024. But I was looking back at Ultra sign up, and it looks like you just kind of, you started trail running, and then you looks like you just jumped straight into trail races as well while you're still in school.
Yeah. I started off kind of, I would say a little bit more chill. Like, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm a trail runner now. I've never done even a half marathon. I'm going to do a 50K. That wasn't me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
a little bit too cautious for that. So I think my first trail race was a 12K, and it was the Music City Trail Ultra. If you've ever been out there, seen that, my friend John
Oh yeah.
Burton puts on the best races, and I've done a ton of
Yeah.
his races. And I went out to that course, and I had only been running trails for like a couple months at that point. And I saw all these people who seemed to all know each other and like were really friendly. And I was so intimidated because I didn't know anyone. I'd never been to a trail running group. Um, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I want to be friends with these people. Like, they seem really cool, but I'm very
Yeah.
intimidated. And so it was a couple weeks after that, I went to my first trail running group. And I still remember like listening to the conversation between a couple of people talking about training for 100-mile race. And I was like, I thought I was like pretty badass for running a marathon. I want to be like you guys. And those people are awesome, and I'm friends with them now.
Yeah.
But I definitely did not jump into the deep end to start out.
Yeah. What trail club was that in Nashville?
The dirtbags.
Dirtbags. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
familiar with the Dirtbags. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And it looks like you've run the Music City race now 3 times, I think. Is that right?
Different distances each year.
Right.
I think I skipped it one year, but I had a really rough 25K. And by rough, I mean I'd never had cramps, like
Okay.
debilitating cramps in a race before. And it was hot that year, and it was like this final hill that's just a hill of like hell. I mean, it's awful. It's at the very end of the race.
Yeah.
And I just had to sit there and lay down and like just suffer. Because I had no more liquid. I had nothing to eat. I just like suffered. And I went back this year and I was like, I am not gonna let that happen again. Like, I don't know what I need to do. And I had a really good race this year, and I was really happy with that. So that was fun.
Yeah. Nice. And so like all this time you're doing these races, you're in school, you're training, all of this. Are you just kind of self-coaching? Were you coached at any point?
Yes. I mainly self-coached, but I will say that Joe, who you had on the podcast, Joe Jude. Hey Jude. Joe Stanek. He goes
Yep.
by that name now. He goes by his real name. So
Yeah.
I met Joe through the Dirtbags group, and Joe, I kind of like think I didn't really ask him to be my coach. I was kind of like, hey Joe, would you write me a plan? Just like thinking, hey, he'll write me a plan. Super low key. Because I wanted to run it wasn't my first 50K, but it was my first 50K race. Um, and I knew that it was actually one of my busier semesters of law school. And I was just like, I need help trying to be efficient with my training. Um, and Joe came to me one day at a group run, and he had handwritten out like several pages, several phases of a plan for me,
Nice.
like by each week. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Thank you. And I didn't like have any idea. I asked him at some point in the training a question, and he was like so responsive and so nice. And then he kept checking in with me. And I was like, I'm not paying you. Like you're like you don't need you know, feel like you have to go out of your way to help me. But he did. And so Joe definitely was my coach. Like I will
That's
tell anyone
awesome.
that. He was a great coach. And I'll use him again too. But yeah, he helped me a ton. And I did my first trained 50K that was a race in January of last year. And it was on Catalina Island in California, which was the most beautiful race. I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah. Now, is that one out in California? Is that, I don't know much about Catalina Island, but is there elevation or is that kind of a flat 50K?
Yeah, so Catalina is quite hilly. It's not at all technical. It was mainly just like tamped down dirt roads.
Okay.
So fast from that perspective, but there's a lot of steep climbs, like a lot of trails in California. Like it just kind of goes on for a while, like a long climb. And same with like the descents. But there were also like a lot of flat sections too. So it was a good race for me. Um, you probably didn't even need to wear trail shoes for it, but it was a trail race. But it
Okay.
wasn't technical at all. So
Yeah, it's probably, I did a race in San Francisco in the Marin Headlands, and
which one?
it was the Golden Gate Trail Classic. It was a couple
Okay.
of years ago. So
Okay.
it sounds very similar, like that,
Yeah.
almost like crushed gravel, hard packed dirt, where it's
Yep. Yeah. And
kind of
there's
like
some muddy parts too, but like a lot of
yeah.
it was so super, super runnable, not like stuff you see out in Tennessee.
No, no, gosh, yeah. I
Yeah.
used to live in Tennessee as well. It's where I met Joe, but yeah,
Yeah.
those are another level. They're very technical,
Yeah.
muddy, rocky, rooty, and nasty. Yeah,
It's great. I love it. It's great
I do
training.
too. It is awesome. And it looks like too, we kind of went ahead to the Avalon or the Avalon Benefit
hmm
50K that you did,
hmm
but you also did the Mid-State Mile, the last person standing
Did.
race. Yeah, and then
Yep.
how did that go? Because that's a pretty tough course.
So that was technically my second 50K. My first 50K was actually, or my first ultra was, I don't know if you're familiar with Harlansdale Farm in Franklin. It's just like a park,
I've heard of it.
near
Yeah.
downtown. There's a nice 3 mile loop on the outside of that. And all my friends were doing these ultras. And I was like, I really want to run an ultra, but I just don't have the time to commit to like training and like finding a race and traveling and the time in investing in traveling. And it was like a Thursday run. And the leader of our group, Jack Sales, we call him Pancho Blanco. You might know Jack. I was like, Jack, I think I'm just going to run like a 50K at the park near my house. And he was like, you should do it, but don't tell anyone you're going to do it. And I was like, well, I was going to have some people like come out. And he was like, no,
Yeah.
just do it and don't tell anyone. I was like, okay, great. So I think that was the Thursday. And then the next Monday, my spring break started and I didn't have anything going on. So I was like, I'm just going to go out to the park and I'm going to see if I can run 30 miles. And I did it. And honestly, it wasn't hard. Like as it goes, because it's not tough terrain. I mean, there's some hills, but it's not super tough. And I felt good and I just kind of took it easy and had fun. And I was like, great. Um, and then that summer, I'd become familiar with the Mid-State Mile because it's super close to where I live, and I know Becca. Or I don't know if I knew Becca at that time, but I'd like heard of her. I'd seen her around a bunch. And I had been out to the course for the Tennessee Mile that past December, and I
Okay.
walked it. So I was like familiar with the course, and I was like, this just sounds crazy, and I love this idea. So I signed up for it and I did train for it. I did train a lot of hills. Definitely could have done more, but my goal was to just do more than I'd run before. Which like it's very steep. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not anything like my first 50K was. So, but at the same time, you're like walking a lot too. Because it's not the same type of like speed event as a lot of
Right.
things
Right.
are. So I just hung out with friends the whole day and talked and like I felt great physically until I didn't. Both my knees, but like my knee and like hips just started getting super inflamed. And then the uphill was okay, but the downhill really started to get to me and I switched to poles when we could use poles. And eventually I just dropped out because I was like, I'm in a lot of pain right now and I don't think it would be wise to continue pushing. So
Yeah.
but that was a great day, and I had such a good time. I met so many cool people with cool stories, that I still am like see around and I'm familiar with. So that was a good intro into kind of the greater trail running community. I met Luke Bolschweiler there too, or
Yeah. Okay.
met Luke at some other race in Maryville where he lives. And we ended up hanging out under the same tent. And he did, I don't remember how many miles he did that year, but he was close to being first.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was a good year. I think he got, I think it was just over 100, I think, something like that. It was
I
really
don't
close.
remember, but it was crazy. Yeah. And Jill
Yeah.
Dennis, I think I met
Yeah.
Jill out there too, and like chatted with her, and I was like, this girl is a beast. So it was a cool race to connect with other people and be inspired by people for sure.
Yeah, that race draws a certain type of trail runner
Yes.
to it that
Yeah.
loves
True.
difficult, hard elevation type races. And
Yep.
yeah, you always get some great battles and some great stories come out of the Mid-State Mile or any of the races that Becca and John put on there at their
Yeah.
pay-per-views. It's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. And so another race that I've been very interested in, this looks like I think this might have been your first victory, was the Black Toe Run 24 hour. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Black Toe's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that's one that I always wanted to do but never got the chance to do before I moved away from Tennessee.
Come back. It'll be here.
Yeah. Well, it looks like you did the 24-hour version there, and I know everybody always wants to go for that 100, but that's incredibly elusive at this race.
I would love to do that. That would be a long-term goal. But I mean, we had, I would say, near perfect conditions this last year, and I can't imagine doing 100 even. I mean, it is a goal, but that would be tough.
Yeah.
So I did, I guess, what John would consider 75 miles. It's a little bit long, so it was more like 76 and a half. And then I added on because I just wanted to get to 80 I wanted to keep running. Because the way the race is set up, it's a 5-ish mile loop. And you have, like, it's 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever. And if you come in and you only have like 20 or 30 minutes left before time, whatever you run after that, if you don't complete a full loop, it's not going to count towards your time for the race purpose. So I
Okay.
came in and my goal had been like all along just to keep moving for 24 hours. And I had like 30 or 40 minutes left in the day or in the 24-hour period. And I was like, I'm just going to head out and do a couple more miles because I want to see if I can get to 80. And then I'll quit when time's up. So
Yeah.
so I did that, but I only did 75 according to John. So that's fine.
But
I'm not counting.
that's awesome though that you went back out for, bonus miles, I guess, to get out there. They didn't not official miles, but
Yeah.
that's good determination there. That's pretty awesome. That did you end up with black toes? Because I know that race is notorious for the mud, the cold weather,
Yeah.
just being very brutal on the feet.
I actually my feet held up pretty dang good. I ended up with blisters, like nothing gross, nothing too bad. But I think the fact that it was dry was like incredible. So it was nothing like you see like after 100 milers. My feet were okay. I always get some black toes after a race, like even if it's a shorter race.
Yeah.
But nothing. It took like a month or so, so it was delayed.
Yeah. And now that course too, it's like you said, it's 5-ish mile loop and it's on some farm property of John's, I believe, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of the vibe there just looks very small, like community type vibe where everybody just kind of hangs out around a fire and has a great time.
Very
Like that
much so.
atmosphere. Yeah, it just sounds
Very
amazing.
much
It's a
so.
great event.
It was one of the coolest experiences I've had because I've done like trail relays. So I'd like done running in the night with a group before. But I think that experience of, okay, I've run all day and now the sun is setting and now I have to get through the night. Um, I think anyone who's run a 100 miler like knows that feeling of shit. I have to,
Yeah.
I got the whole night I have to go through and then,
Right.
and I definitely had that feeling, but I didn't really run with anyone throughout the day. Just kind of listening to music and I was kind of like, not mad, but I was like, man, I thought that I'd be running with people the whole time. And like, I was running my own race. And nobody was really like with me. Like people were ahead of me and they were behind me, but no one was like really with me during the day. And then at night, I started running with a guy I knew a little bit, and we just chatted, hung out for a couple laps, and then someone else came and like hung out with me for a couple laps, just. And then I started to have really bad back pain, which I'm still not sure what that was about. I think I might have over relied on the trekking poles. Um, but that was awful. But I had a good friend, Keith Overbay from Nashville. Shout out to Keith.
Oh yeah.
Who just like he listened to me complain the whole time and stop every 5 minutes and just like lay down on the ground for hours. And we did sunrise fireball shots.
Nice.
And so I got through that race through like a community of people. And that was what was so cool about that is just like the aid station volunteers, like the people back at the tents. Like when I would come back in from a loop, people would come over like, here's some coffee. Let me massage your back. Let me like, do you need a foam roller? Like, do you need new shoes? What do you need? And it was just such a great experience from that perspective.
That's awesome. I've done a lot of things in my life. You know, I've raced cars. I was in the army. I've done trail and ultra running, and I've never found a community that is as just selfless as the ultra community. Like literally somebody will give you a shirt off of their back if you need it, or a pair of shoes off their feet. Like it's amazing. Anyone out there that's listening, go try an ultra marathon. Like trust me, you'll get hooked.
Yeah.
Well, now the Black Toe as well, isn't that, I know you said it's like 5-ish miles per loop, but isn't that when like, is it like 1,500 feet of gain per loop or somewhere around there?
That's about right. I don't remember. It's very sneaky because like if you look at it, like if you're out there, you're like, oh, this doesn't, and even I'd been out before and I'd kind of hiked and run out there in previous years. But there's a field that's just kind of flat. There's a lot of flat. And then there's like all these like ups and downs and like technical through the woods. And so it is really sneaky. It gets you though. It definitely gets you.
Yeah, definitely. That'll add up, especially when you get, higher like you did. 75 miles is pretty amazing. So that's definitely congratulations there.
Thank you.
And it looks like, I mean, this year, 2024 has just been outstanding for you because then you went on, the next month to the Music City Trail Ultra again, but this time the 50K distance. And you, again, were the first female, 5th overall in a 5:40. So, I mean, how did that race go for you? It sounds like it went well, but did you have any low points there, or was it smooth sailing?
It pretty much was smooth sailing, and it was super, I would say, unexpected. Because after Black Toe, I felt pretty good, but I took like a week off because I was just, like kind of some pains here and there and like felt pretty good pretty quickly after. But I wasn't training for it. It was just something I'd signed up for that I was like, I hope I feel good enough to do this. And I think just all the training I'd put in over the past couple of years started to pay off in that I knew the course pretty well. And I had a bone to pick with that final hill. And like, I also knew it might be kind of warm. It was a little bit warm towards the end. And I found that if it's going to be warm and I wear like the tall compression socks, that actually helps a lot for me because I tend to cramp in my calves. And that worked well for me. Like I could tell I was getting close to cramping, but I never did. There were some cool people out there racing too. Like I ran with several different folks throughout the course. But my good friend Travis McKnight, he and I have like done a lot of these races. I kind of like met him at the beginning of my trail running journey. And we had this like friendly competition going. As Travis has gotten a lot faster over the last couple of years, like he has like really put down some training. And I just always am like, I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat you. And Travis is fast and he's a big dude. Like he's really strong. But I enjoy that friendly competition. And so he was ahead of me the whole time. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna see this dude. At the very end of the race, we're like in the field and there's like a half a mile left maybe. And I see him and I'm just like trying to catch him. I think I finished, if you look at the time, I think I finished a second behind him.
Oh, wow.
And I was yelling at him too at the end because I wanted him to speed up, but he says he didn't hear me. And he says if he would have, he would have run faster and he would have beat me by more. But yeah,
awesome.
it was a good day. And just a lot of camaraderie out on the trail. But yeah, I don't really know. I was kind of I went out with no expectations and just wanted to have fun and I felt pretty good. And I think something that a lot of runners on that course struggle with is there's some pretty tough climbs and technical sections. And I walk the climbs. Like I always hike the climbs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who I will see just like running up the climbs. And I'm like, that's cool. You do you. But I have done that too. And I know that I don't have enough gas in the tank when it comes to the fire roads. And the fire roads are really runnable. And there's a lot of them to the end. There's like several
Yeah.
miles of them. And so my plan this year was to just like, take it easy on all the climbs and then save up for the fire roads. And I did, and that worked out really well for me. I passed a bunch of people on those roads because people couldn't run them as fast as they wanted to, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common thing. People try to charge up those hills, and then you end up somebody will pass them on the flats or the downhill because they're just completely shot. I'm guilty of it. I've done it before too.
And you have to know your own strengths because like some people are better climbers than I am.
Right.
I'm a pretty good like flat runner, so I know that, and I can't like watch someone else who's a good climber and get scared and be like, oh no, I have to do what they're doing. Like I got to do what I'm going to
Right.
do.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta run your own race. That's like
Yeah.
I forget who told me that. Somebody told me that many years ago, and that's probably the best advice I was given. Just run your own race, stick to your plan, because
Yep.
don't worry about what somebody else in front of you is doing. You don't know if they're gonna blow up or if they're just crushing it. So,
That's right.
yeah. So you did that. You finished that in first place and second, fifth overall, which is just outstanding. And then it got even better because I mean, this year you went again to the Natchez Trace Marathon because I think you did this one before, right?
That was my first trail marathon, so I love that
Okay.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's from what I know about that course is it's kind of like that similar crushed gravel dirt kind of path, not very technical and pretty darn fast. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so not totally.
Okay.
There's some sections where you get out onto the road for a little bit. The first half is much faster than the second half.
Okay. Is it
I
point
was
to point?
running, it is a point to point, yeah.
Okay.
It's beautiful. There's also a 50 miler, so you can start at the finish for the marathoners and then come back.
Oh,
That
okay.
sounds awful to me. I will not be doing that.
Yet.
But it's some good single track. Because of the time of year, and I will say, like John does a good job, and the volunteers do a good job of clearing the trail. Like it's really brambly. I live near there, so I go out there sometimes. But I won't go out
Okay.
there in the summer because it gets so overgrown. Um, it can be fairly technical in places. Like there's a lot of
Okay.
places to get tripped up. And the leave coverage can also trip people up. It wasn't
Yeah.
super bad this year. But it's definitely more technical than some people maybe were prepared for. I know there are a lot of people
Okay.
out there this year who don't do a lot of trail running, but they all seem to enjoy it. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because that's another one of those that I wanted to. I was one of those people that wanted to go out and do that 50 miler
yeah,
because it looked like it would be a really good place to go run a pretty fast 50 just to
sure,
test.
yeah.
But it looks
There's
like
some
I mean,
crazy records on that trail for sure.
yes, there are.
Yeah,
And speaking of records, I mean, you went out and set the course record in a 4 hour and 24 minute time, finished first female and second overall, which is just amazing. And now, did you have the course record before this as well?
I didn't. So I ran this race in 2021.
Okay.
So that would have been my 1L fall. And then I had a good race that year. I didn't have high expectations and I had a good time. Francesca Muccini won, I think she won it. Yeah, she won it that year. Um,
Great runner.
and I didn't even know I was behind her the whole way. And I feel like I started to catch up towards the end. And I didn't know that, but I didn't even know who she was. And I met her at that race and I was like, this woman's amazing. But yeah, I've wanted to go back and set that record because I thought it was attainable for me for a little while. So I had a great first half this year. The second half was kind of rough. I had some cramps. I tripped a little bit.
No.
There's a creek crossing at the end and it is much more technical. It runs by the river and then you cross through the river. It's very slippery. It's kind of deep. Um, and it's easy to get lost. So the last couple miles kind of suck. But it's fun. It's fun. So it was a great
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Well, what shoes were you wearing during this? I know you said you still like the speed goats, but did you try something different for this race?
I actually was wearing my speed goats for that one. Yeah.
Okay. What
Yeah.
other shoes do you rotate and mix up?
Yeah, so for black toe, I started out with my speed goats. That's usually what I'll wear to race in because I've just not had issues with them racing. But during black toe, like pretty early on, I started to get blisters. And I wasn't sure why. I remember talking to Joe out there, and he was like, "Yeah, if you've got another pair of shoes, I would change them now rather than continue going down that road." So probably like maybe two or three loops in, I changed into Ultra Superiors, which I just got on Amazon for kind of cheap. So super low profile. And I ran almost, I think changed back into the Speed Goats closer to the end because my Ultras were kind of wet.
Uh,
But I ran at least 60 miles in those Superiors and it was
oh,
great.
wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially now, and you,
Oh, I was just gonna say I like to switch between like an ultra or like a closer to zero drop and then like a speed goat. But I also like the toe box on ultra more.
yeah,
Um, so I'm still searching for my perfect ultra shoe. I've tried a couple. I've tried the Timp. I've tried the Mont Blanc I tried recently. That one gave my ankle issues. And I like them, but there's always like some little thing that I'm like, I just don't like
yeah.
that.
Well,
So
I'll tell you, there's a shoe coming out next year. I was just at the running event down in Texas this week for seeing
okay.
all the shoes coming out next year.
Okay.
And Topo Athletic has a new
Yep.
shoe coming out called the Trail Vista, and
Okay.
it looks kind of. It sounds like kind of like what you would be a good option to try. It's got that wide toe
Okay.
box like an Ultra, but it
Okay.
also has a like a 4 or 5 millimeter drop. So there's a little stack to it, just a bit,
Yeah.
but it has a lot of cushion in it. So I'm excited about that shoe. It seems like it's going to be a really, really good one.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
tried Topo. I've kind of tried to venture into other. I just got a pair of Salomons that I like so far. But the way I do it, Steven, is like whatever's the cheapest thing I can find on clearance is what I buy
There you
because I'm
go.
still balling on my postgraduate still debt budget. So
Yes, definitely. What pair of Solomons did you just pick up?
I think they're the Sense Ride 5,
Okay.
something like
Yeah.
that. They're like whatever I wear is usually like one model or two models behind whatever everyone else is buying.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know I always searched running warehouse and I would look at the clearance side, the section first and find something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. Well, what in all these races, but more specifically these ones where you've had such success this year, first place in 3 races so far, what's your like your fueling strategy or your go-to fuel that you use for these events?
That's something I really need to figure out because I don't have a good strategy and I want to do no business next year. So I really need to figure out the fueling.
Yeah.
I have used baby food in the past. I don't like goos. I've really struggled with goo. I have liked it until I can't take it anymore. And
Yes.
that's usually what'll happen. I'll be able to feel okay for a while and then I just get to a point where I can't do anything. So usually I'll do like, not scratch was tailwind for a
Tailwind. Yep.
liquid and kind of just try to go the liquid mainly route because I don't have problems with that I kind of have the approach of like whatever is available at the aid station. Like if I know it's going to be a hard win adventure race, I know there's going to be good food options. um but if it's something I'm not as familiar with, I'll bring Reese's cups.
Oh, there you go.
That's what I'll eat. That's what I ate at Natchez. So I don't eat a lot. And I need to figure that out more. During Black Toe, like I did bring a lot of different things. I would do like peanut butter and jelly, like roll ups, and I'm gluten free. So it's kind of hard at some of these races to find stuff that works for me. I
Yeah.
did bring a lot of food, a lot of my own food to Black Toe. But like anything like potatoes, I love like something kind of more bland too. But yeah, I'm still like struggling with what works. Like my problem is a lot of things at races have a ton of sugar and that
Yes.
doesn't really sit well with me after a while. Like I love Reese's cups, but I can't have like that all the time during a
Yeah.
race.
Well, one thing I would recommend trying out just if for a race because they are expensive and it's something that my wife used at No Business
Mhm.
and I really like them is the NAC purees. It's like basically like a
Yeah,
baby
okay.
food like
Uh-huh.
a baby food or like an applesauce, but they have they're like 200 calories per pouch,
Uh-huh.
and they have some fat in them. They got some protein. They got you all your electrolytes, but they just sit really well. Like
Hmm.
it's real food. So
Yeah.
for 100, that's kind of what you need. Maybe worth trying something like that out because
Yeah.
I know no business. Have you been there at all in a crew capacity or anything?
Yeah. So we were there this year. A couple of my friends were out there running. So I drove out with a friend on Friday night and we just did the whole kind of driving from point to point. And I crewed my friend Travis from Peters Mountain to the finish. So I had a shorter
Okay.
pacing. I should say I paced him to the finish. I had a
Nice.
shorter pacing than a lot of people out there did, which was pretty
Yeah.
cool because I had Natchez the next weekend and I was like, can we do the shorter distance?
Right. Yeah. So if you drove out, what time were you there Friday morning for the start by chance?
No, no, we left Friday
Okay.
after work, my friend and I. Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know because I was talking to Joe at Pickett State Park there, and there was a
Hmm.
couple of women and another man that were crewing some people and from the Tennessee area.
That
I just didn't know.
that could have been some of our friends. Travis's girlfriend Melody was there, and yeah,
Yeah.
there were a couple. We had a bigger group. We had a bigger group out there, and it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you crewed and paced from Peters to the finish, then you know the aid stations out there are some of the best in the business. They're
Oh
very
my
well
gosh.
stocked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially later in the day and the later in the morning the next day you have like pancakes and full breakfast basically, so that'll be
What was the big one out in it was like at mile like 62 or like 80 or no, not
well, so
what is that one? You know,
the biggest one is blue
big
heron.
one. That Blue Heron. Blue Heron was the one we got to at probably like 10 or 11 p.m. driving from
Yeah.
Nashville. And we roll up, we've like rolled down this like windy road that's kind of crazy, a lot of hairpin turns. And we
Yeah.
roll up and it's like big structures that look like pavilions and like tree houses and stuff. And then just like a bunch of bright lights. And it's just I was describing it to my boyfriend who's never really been in that type of like ultra running environment. We were talking on the phone the next day and I was like describing it to him. I was like, I can't wait for you to see this because you're not going to know what's going on. You're going to feel like you're having some sort of weird trippy dream. It just like must appear so strange to like
Right.
non-runners.
Out in the middle of nowhere, like you have this massive.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like all kinds of foods and soups, and it's awesome. So yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be well taken care of when you run that next year. Now, are you going to set your alarm to register the night of the entry opens because it sells out quickly?
I'm running my last race of the year tomorrow. I'm running the Flying Monkey Marathon here.
Oh,
Well,
cool.
I guess I'm doing a turkey trot too, but that doesn't count. Um, I'm gonna get through December and like see how it goes and like make the call next month.
Okay.
But I've been toying around with no business for a couple of years and getting to go out there this year was really cool. Um, there's a lot of life changes happening, so it's hard to commit to doing 100 miler, and that's what I definitely need a coach.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not all the way there yet, but I'm like 90% of the way there.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine having, just graduated a couple months ago and now you're probably just, in this career and getting your own flow and things. That's got to be
Yeah.
hectic and trying to train for 100. I mean,
Well, and
it's a
I'm
lot of
dating
commitment.
somebody and he is like he's super supportive, but this isn't his world. He's a climber. He's super big into climbing.
Ah,
So we're kind of trying to work the balance of like how do we support each other in our athletic endeavors? And I like to climb. I'm very new to the sport. I started climbing a little bit before I met him. But it's been cool to learn from him and like go out with him. And I'm like, okay, we can do this where we can have like a weekend we can do more in the winter because he likes to climb more in the winter. Like I can do the running thing more in the summer because it's great training.
yeah.
So it's kind of figuring out that balance of like what works well for both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you guys are like aware of that and spending and making it intentional to figure out a way to make it work. Because I think a lot of people get stuck in a way of somebody who just focuses on themselves and what they want to do, and then you end up with big fights later on in life, and it's just
Yeah,
So
that's no good.
good. Yeah, no, good on you guys for taking care of that now. That's awesome. So this the race tomorrow, the Flying Monkey Marathon, is this a trail or a road marathon?
It's a road marathon. So out at Percy
Okay.
Warner, um,
Ah,
it's put on by Monkey Trent, Rosenblum, and it's been around almost maybe like 18, 19 years.
oh wow.
And it's super quirky and fun. I have volunteered there a couple of years ago. I've never gotten to do it since I've been in law school because it's always been the week before finals. Um, so I've been wanting to do it for a while, but it's just that, yeah, it's roads at Percy Warner. Um, it's a smaller race. It's not like,
Okay.
I don't know if it's chip time. Maybe it is. Um, I mean, there's bibs. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of the, people from the local trail running community do it. And so I'm actually after this, I'm gonna go do a pre-race pasta dinner with some friends.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's a big one every year, and I'm excited to get to finally do it.
Well, that's awesome. I hope it goes well for you. Enjoy
Thank
it and
you.
have a good time. But you mentioned something I totally forgot I wanted to talk about was Percy Warner. Joe
Yeah.
told me Joe told me that you hold the fastest time on the red loop at Percy Warner, which I don't know what that means. But Joe
Yeah.
said in his mind, he said that's pretty darn prestigious because there's like over a thousand efforts on Strava on this. And so like in that local
Joe,
community, it sounds like it's
I
pretty
forgot
awesome.
about that. Oh man, yeah, I remember when I was training for my 50K, I would go out and I would see that I was close to some of the course records on different segments at the park. And there's some real fast women in Nashville. But for some reason, sometimes the fast women don't end up on the trails.
Yeah.
Which is sort of nice for some of us who are competitive, but are like, no, no, I'm joking. But yeah, no, there's a ton of fast people. But I think this segment was like attainable, and I had like accidentally almost gotten it once when I was doing a tempo run on the trail, and Joe was like, "Well, go out there when you're like fresh, next year and like go get it." Um and one day I remember like I was like, "I'm going to try for this and see if I get it." And I did. And I forgot about that. That was like a year ago. I can't believe I don't know if that's still out there, but I bet Joe knows. If Joe
Yeah,
says so,
probably does.
I
Yeah.
believe him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me about this loop because I don't know about it. Like, what's the
That's
distance and
cool.
elevation?
It's about 5 miles. It's probably like 1,000 feet elevation gain.
Okay.
It's it's just a great classic trail, and that's kind of where all of the people in the Nashville area train for races. There's the red loop, there's the white loop, and the blue loop. And both the white and the blue are closer to 3 miles, and so we'll add them all together and do what most people call a Patriot loop, red, white, and
Okay.
blue. Um, but yeah, it's just yeah, everybody who does trail running in the Nashville area does the red loop, I would say, as like just a general kind of it's a good 5 mile run. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But you
That's
said you
awesome.
used to live here and you haven't run it. So
Well,
I'm
I've never lived
confused.
in Nashville. I lived
Okay.
over I lived over, do you know, I'm sure you probably know where Frozen Head State Park is. So,
Yeah.
okay. I used to train there all the time. That's how I met Joe. 'Cause I
Yeah.
used to live like 20 minutes from there.
No way. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cool.
I was out there and filmed Joe when he was out doing his 5 days in a row out there
Yeah. Oh,
kicking some
so
butt.
cool.
So it's
Yeah, I
yeah.
love Frozen Head.
Oh, it's a great place. Great place to train.
Yeah.
The trails are awesome. So, well,
Uh-huh.
I know you mentioned that you're kind of like in this transition phase, we'll say, where you're kind of trying to figure out how to make things work with you and your boyfriend,
Mhm.
but you mentioned no business possibly, but what?
To make things work with him,
No,
they're working.
no, no, not at all. Yeah. That's what I meant.
He's gonna listen to this. He's gonna be like, "What?"
Not what I meant, boyfriend. Sorry about that. No. But no, trying to make things work for you both to do your sports, your athletic endeavors that you want
Yeah,
to do.
yeah.
And so what do you have in mind for next year? Do you have any races already registered?
Hmm.
Things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. So far, all I know, well, I have two that I'm registered for. I'm gonna do
Okay.
Mountain Mist at the end of January, and I'm sure you've heard of that one. Like, it's a pretty classic one
Oh
in
yeah.
the Southeast. Um, I was gonna do black toe again. I was gonna do the 24-hour again, but I honestly don't. My training is not really where it needs to be for that type of endeavor, like that type of long and distance endeavor right now.
Mhm.
Um, and then recently a friend was like, "Hey, you should come run the 50K with us." I was like, "That actually makes a lot more sense for what I want to do next year." And I've always wanted to get out there anyway, so that'll be fun. And I am gonna go just volunteer at Black Toe, so that way I get the best of both worlds.
Nice.
Um, and then I'm signed up to do the Grayson Highlands 50 miler with
Ah,
a bunch of my friends, so that should be super fun too. Have you heard of that
that'll be
one?
awesome. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a beautiful race.
Yeah. So I'm stoked to see some horses, hopefully, some wild
And that's
horses.
in April, right? Is that right?
It's in
April
May
or May?
actually. May.
May?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, I think it was this year. It was so cloudy that people couldn't even see like the gorgeous views, which was unfortunate.
Yeah. That's I feel like you kind of risk that at elevation in that part of the country. But as
Yeah.
long as I see some horses, I'll be happy.
Any other races on the calendar or ones that you're looking forward to?
No business, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
I could probably be like I'll be pestered into some other races. But I also want to like give space to like see how the year plays out and just other
Yeah.
stuff with work and relationships and all that stuff.
Definitely. Definitely. It's very
Yeah.
important. You got to find that balance for sure.
Hmm.
Very,
Hmm.
very hard to do, but it's very important.
Yeah. There's so many races I'd love to do. It's just the time and the money and traveling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. An ultra runner who lives out here in Denver, Colorado, and she's been on the podcast. But she wrote an article for Outside Magazine Online, I believe, and it was called "The Hidden Cost of Ultra Running." And she talked all
Hmm.
about the cost, not just of the entry, but you have your lodging, your fuel to get there, or your plane tickets, your training, all the
Yeah.
the shoes and everything. It was like I think it ended up costing like $4,000 to run 100 milers. What she came to, which is just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
I've
that's what we have to do.
I've definitely benefited from like friends like John has I've done a little bit of volunteering and I need to be better in doing more and I plan to this year. Like Joe started talking about when on his podcast episode with you, like I am now in a place I've spent the last 3 years being poured into by my community and people who have been really generous with their time and resources. And now that
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the other side and starting to build out of that, it's time for me to be more generous with my time and resources. So there's a lot more volunteer work I want to do, and it's just these races. So that
Yeah.
will be cool. But I've gotten into some races, like I've gotten some free race entries and benefited from people's generosity in that way. But yeah, there have been other things I probably should have spent my money on. The other hand, there's a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm spending money on this other expensive hobby," and I'm like,
Right.
I buy like 10 pairs of shoes a year for trail running, and then I keep them like pretty cheap. So
Yeah.
you win
Definitely.
some, you lose some.
Yep. Yep. Well, Brooke, it's been great chatting with you, hearing your story and kind of how you balanced law school and trail running and just life and everything. And just congratulations to you for having such an outstanding year. Well, first with graduating law school,
Thank
congratulations
you.
there. But
Thank you.
also the 3 victories is awesome. And hope you have a great race tomorrow with the Flying Monkey Marathon,
Flying monkey.
Trail
Yep.
Marathon. Yeah,
Mhm.
a good race. And
Thank you.
thank you for coming on. It's been fun talking with you.
Thanks, dude. You too.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Adventure Jogger, please consider joining our Patreon and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok for more content like this. Without your continued support, we would not be able to produce this type of content. So thank you so much to everyone that has listened, followed along, subscribed, liked, commented, you name it, donated on Patreon. Thank you.